Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome back to Ukraine House Davos. We're thrilled that you're here for our next panel, Will Technology Save the World? And it is sponsored by the IT Ukraine Association. We're incredibly grateful to you for making this panel happen. Thank you very much. I understand we'd like to kick off first with a video. And then we'll introduce the panelists. This video together. You know? Have you seen this? Is there no sound? No? I think we'll just have this video running in the background because the sound doesn't seem to be working. I'd like to introduce the moderator. Noah Gaffney-Slaney is the Executive Director of Rutgers Institute for Corporate Social Innovation. Welcome. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you so much. I'm really delighted to be here with these incredible panelists because, as we know, we're in the midst of the fourth industrial revolution. And that means that many technologies are accelerating at the same time. So in previous industrial revolutions, there was one prevalent technology, and that led to massive shifts. But now we're seeing revolutions in everywhere from fintech to biotech to edtech, and the implications are massive. Of course, this provides a lot of different opportunities. So we can think about transforming billions of lives through increased access to education, better treatment for non-communicable and communicable diseases, thinking about access to millions outside of the traditional financial sector. I mean, the potential is massive. But unfortunately, we're also seeing a lot of backlash and a lot of the unintended consequences that we couldn't have anticipated previously. So we're looking at things like access, right? Not everyone has equal access to the internet and these new technologies. We're also seeing bias in the operating systems. And of course, it's really hard to ignore the issues around inequality and the future of work and what that means for the loss of jobs. So with that, I want to make sure that we talk about the positive aspects of technology. I was at the Edelman Barometer breakfast this morning, and they were saying that trust is built on the intersection of competence and ethics. And so how do we think about building technology in a way that is both competent and ethical? And so I'd like to turn it over to my panelists to discuss today's topic of will technology save the world? So I'll call you guys all up. And I'll let you introduce yourself. So why don't we start with you, Alex?
So my name is Alex Chibai. I'm a Chief Technology Officer at SoftServe, where I lead technology strategy and execution. For those of you who are not familiar with SoftServe yet, it's a global company with Ukrainian roots. I think up to almost 10,000 people that we have, most of them are in Ukraine, are based in Ukraine, where they design, architect, and engineer digital products, platforms, and digital experiences. Thank you.
I'm Alex Bornikov, and I'm a Deputy Minister of Digital Transformation. And in the ministry, I'm in charge of developing and growth of IT industry in Ukraine, and of course, any communication with the IT industry. So that would be all.
Hi, everyone. My name is Kira Rudik. I am former CEO of Ring Ukraine. Probably some of you heard of the startup Ring that was sold to Amazon for $1 billion in 2018. So it has like a massive office in Ukraine. And since last year, I'm actually moved to politics, and I'm working in the Committee of the Digital Transformation as a deputy head. So now, instead of working in IT, I'm working on the laws for IT.
Great.
Hi, my name is Alexei Skripnik. Instead of, I just moved from politics back to business. I was 5 years in the parliament and now returned back as a founder and president of Alex company.
Yeah, thank you. My name is Vitaly Sedlar. I'm co-founder and CEO of Ukrainian IT company called Intellias. I have nothing to do with politics. I'm only business here. And in our company, we run a number of projects that are at the edge of fourth industrial revolution. And that's the experience that I think I will share today.
Wonderful. Well, thank you all for joining us. You have so much expertise in the room and from different sectors as well. So I'm really looking forward to your thoughts. And why don't we kick off with just which technologies do you think have the greatest potential for impact?
Yeah, so we go from left to right, or?
So I would say that right now we live in sort of like a technology big bang. And over the last 20, maybe 30 years, like we see this confluence of globalization of workforce, globalization of supply chain, cheap money that we have right now. For the last like 10 years, like during the quantitative easing, we generated a lot of money and poured into the economy. So all these elements have created like a really great momentum for this kind of big bang that we have. And with this universe that exists and still expanding, I would specifically articulate the area of deep tech, which is like about AI, biotech, advanced materials, those things that create competitive advantage that is really hard to replicate. That's like just basically give us like the cutting edge of the progress. So basically, it's an overlap of the scientific progress and the technology engineering. So those things in this area, I would. It's really hard, like even to say like only one technology, because like what happens in real time is that they kind of like synergetically amplify the effect from each other.
Yes.
So we can't say like, okay, AI is like, like is only one atomic thing. Although I would agree that it's probably the most powerful thing, not only by the end use perspective, but also by its ability to amplify the effect from a lot of different technologies. Like you say AI, you go to computer vision, you go to driverless cars, you go from AI to IoT, 5G, you empower smart cities. So all these chains are enabled through these technologies.
Do you guys agree? Is there one specific technology that you would bet on, or do you think they all build on one another?
Well, I would agree with Alex, because just one domain doesn't give an answer. Because what I wanted to say, that from my perspective, VR and AR, that's kind of a big thing for the future, because it's literally extend our universe. And I'm familiar with some of their latest developments in this, and I was closely watching how it was developing from the start. I was actually one of the first bakers of Oculus Rift, but back in the days when they went to Kickstarter. So, but again, VR and AR themselves, just without AI probably, or without some other stuff that we're talking today, like drones, they not exist in this in the separated universe. So I mentioned VR and AR, and another thing that also can be part of this is robotics. Everything is related to robots. I think it could impact heavily and massively our future and everything that it touches in it. And I admire what Boston Dynamics doing. I'm kind of following, and from the movies, from the video clips that they make, it looks amazing. So this is my answer.
I would add the quantum computing, because what we've heard last year, that the quantum computer has been developed and there are first computing and calculations being done. This is something that, additionally to what my colleagues said, could really change the world and the way that we know it and the way we interact with it.
I just can say a few observations. First of all, our conference is named "Will the Technology Save the World?" Yeah? And maybe the right question, if it not destroy the world. So, and I think this is a question which is all people are asking, because we make the world where instead of saying reinforcement learning, we said artificial intelligence, and all people are waiting for Sarah Connor and Terminator, real or not. And can say that from this point of view, we are now in a safe haven, so it's not happen in nearest future, because it's absolutely artificial intelligence. It's not what people mostly understanding, so they putting absolutely another sense. And another, especially taking Ukraine and Ukrainian house in Davos, I can say that my opinion that we will receive a great synergy of technologies. Especially in Ukraine, one of possible way where 1 + 1 will be 3 or even maybe 10 is agriculture and IT.
I think that's such a great point, right? How does this impact not just the tech industry, but other industries as well? Do you want to comment as well?
Yeah, I would name just maybe two technologies or area of application of technology, which is IoT, so Internet of Things, and autonomous everything. So I see the world as being everything shall be connected with each other, and everything shall be autonomous. So I think autonomous world is something that where you will see a lot of change in the future, which is still underdeveloped in the world, right? So there's huge potential there, and our companies is also developing this technology for our clients.
Absolutely. And it's so interesting you brought that up because all of these technologies have a role to play in achieving the Sustainable Development Goals, right? The UN's plan for 2030. But when we think about the SDGs, actually we normally think about big businesses playing a role, but startups also have a huge role to play. So I was just curious how you guys are thinking about that global impact as you build your businesses and create that enabling ecosystem.
Yeah, so this is a really great question because if we think about the companies, like big company means big inertia. And startups, in that sense, they don't have that kind of legacy burden to carry with them, right? The other aspect is that I think investors right now are ready to wait more for the business model to be proven, for for them to succeed than ever before. And like if public companies have some pressure from investor community to generate profit, from quarter to quarter, I think private equity is more. Like they basically give them like a longer runway to implement that. And I think like the other aspect is I think startups, it's not uncommon when they start from academia, from the deeper researchers, like from some kind of like micro inventions than they do, and then they kind of take it together with the engineering and build something that can be used not only like in the lab, right, but somewhere like outside of the lab, and bring the value to the society. So in that regard, I think startups have a certain advantage. On the other hand, public companies may have more money, like better access to public funds. Because it's a big established company, and you can borrow money much easier. You have a proven business model, right? So you can leverage basically a lot, and that can give them advantage, especially when we're talking about the capital-intensive businesses. So,
well, what is it for me? Well, it's about disruption. Big corporations rarely can make a disruption in any area, but startups can disrupt. And this is their advantage. And this is how they're changing everything. Sometimes, and you can name a lot of examples. And this is how I perceive this. Because big corporations, they slow, they sustain, they prefer stable business model. They don't want to disrupt. And sometimes this is not good. But startups, they look for something brand new, something anyone never touched. And then they look for it, and then they find it, and then they disrupt. And then we see, all of us see that how better this is what they invented, what they offered us. So of course, I believe that we have to rely on startups when we talk about saving the world, first of all, because again, corporations are they're not moving so fast forward and so on and so forth.
And what about the role of government? Kira, why don't we start with you? Because, there's only so much the private sector can do on its own.
Yeah, I wanted to continue on what my colleague said on the startup and government and big public companies, because there is something common between how government operates and how big public company operates, because it's mainly you have lots of boundaries, you have lots of stakeholders, you have to listen to everyone, you have to balance everybody's interests, you have to get tons of certain approvals, etc., etc. So there is no way that you will be able to move as fast as any poor dying startup will be able to do. So, and because when I was working in startup, I was working in big corporation, now I'm in the government, so I can see the difference and similarities. So my bet here on like really disruptive technologies will be on startups, definitely, because even if government has like tons of funds and really tons of willingness to make some changes, to do something, it will be slow and will take lots of time and energy. So what we are thinking right now that it can do is actually look in the startups, look into what really new disruptive technologies can give to the government, actually embrace that and move forward with it. So this is what we are trying to do right now, trying to achieve, take the best of the startup thing and make this energy push our reforms, our governmental changes forward.
And what about you? You obviously did the opposite. You moved from
just
the government ecosystem to the startup world. How have you found the two
have a
different?
special instrument to reading my what I am thinking, because I just wanted once again return back to Ukraine. And especially for the startups, from my point of view, we have now very good timing. Because it's just like, if you allow myself to use such analogy, we have a very nice soup or borscht for combination of different kind of companies. Big outsourcing companies, small startups, small products, good boutiques. So, and my prediction that maybe we cannot predict anything from what will be technology, but from the viewpoint that Ukrainian startups will grow up to unicorns. And this is just like the process which we have now. So it's a good timing for the investment, and especially for the investment in the fields where you have like combination of technologies, agriculture and IT, military and IT. A lot of different combinations where we can receive a good success.
Wonderful. And how are you guys interacting with other sectors, obviously automotive and others? Just really curious to hear how you see technology not just as a force on its own, but in combination with other tools for sustainable development.
Well, if you're talking about automotive sector, that's one of industries which is significantly disrupted right now. So you see what's happening on the market, and you see crazy stories with Elon Musk, right? So when you can build a new car manufacturer in just like 7 to 10 years, and honestly, German car manufacturers are a little bit shocked from the situation, right? So they were thinking they're sitting on a limb, and suddenly they understand the situation is very different. And that's the technology, information technology that makes this happen. And I believe if you're talking about startups and large companies, startups, of course, they're smart, they're fast, they're innovative, they're looking for narrow niches where they can innovate and offer something new. But corporations, they have resources and they have scale. So if you're talking about startups and larger companies, then I think this combination allows you to bring new idea and then scale it very fast. Coming back to automotive sector, there is a number of application areas where information technology plays a major role. So we are talking about autonomous driving, of course. So every one of you understands what will happen when cars become driving by themselves. So this will have huge impact on all our lives. So logistics will become almost very cheap, let's put it like this. Then you have significant optimization of use of other resources, so you have significant optimization of traffic congestion, and so with use of information technologies, this becomes a reality, and this saves you billions and billions and even hundreds of billions of dollars.
Yeah, and I think it's a great point. The driverless cars will lead to fewer instances of traffic, and that means less time, potentially more sustainable vehicles. So that's pretty exciting in and of itself.
No, can I add just real quick to the role of government in this process? I think one of the differences that we have here is that they have the policy-making authority in a country, and that, on one hand, gives a huge power to kind of shape the market in the right direction to make sure that all the participants are kind of going in the direction that we want them to go. But the other thing that I learned over the last several years, I live in the States, I see what the U.S. government is doing. Like, for example, their Department of Transportation allocating a lot of funds. It's like about $300 million for 5 years, $60 million each year, and they incentivize the market to create private-public partnerships in the form of consortia, where you have public sector representatives, local governments, local authorities with private sector, And the goal there is like in that specific case, what they want to do, they want to kind of like, how can we solve the problem of digestion, of congestion? Digestion. Yeah.
First one's a good one too.
Right, I think. But as a byproduct of that, they also solve the problem of, delivering less like ecological footprint, right? And for them, it's easier to incentivize businesses to innovate, to create the new ways to use the infrastructure versus to build a new infrastructure, because like it's like much more expensive and it takes much more time. So what they're trying to do, like it is cheaper for us to do this. So this is something that probably Ukraine could practice, where public sector and the private companies partner together, having a certain rules and moving forward, like moving the agenda in Ukraine in the right direction.
What other success stories have you guys seen in this space?
About government in...
Just in general.
You see, it's funny that the business talking about the government,
Yeah.
so the government have to talk about business.
Well, I keep listening, so that's also useful. Well, I could say a few words. Well, first of all, to the matter that we just discussed, I would divide involvement in the government into two things. The first is when there's no business model. When we're talking about common good, when it is a street light on the streets, right, or something that is, there's no margin,
right?
And the government, in this particular case, have to play a major role, and they have to, I don't know, besides legislation, they have to do real projects. But when it comes about like whether there is business model, I see government role is just intermediary and with less involvement or no involvement at all, because you create easy to use, legislation, understandable, simple, and then business has to flourish on this soil. And I don't know, this is my personal point of view, but this is more like libertarian or something. Mm-hmm. And now about particular things. So I would talk about ministry. I'm not sure if you're familiar, but maybe some of you heard in the news. We launched today a portal called Davos Vita, and we will learn people simple digital skills to prepare them to use the new products that we do as a government and the private sector do. So, and our goal is to teach 6 million people those digital skills. And another thing that we and it's been launched today. So that's the big step ahead. Forward. And then another thing that we also do, but this is kind of like a future thing. We also going to launch a project when we teach people new professions, new digital professions, preparing them to find their place for them and their children in economic 4.0. Because the professions, I'm sure that you're familiar with their research that's most of the current jobs and professions will be obsolete in, 20, 30 years. So we're trying to prepare those people for new digital professions. For instance, that's the shame, actually, but we don't have like digital marketer profession in our universities in Ukraine today. Yeah. Well, I came from ed tech sector before I started government service. I personally felt the pain because I wasn't able to hire a person that understand how to sell or, optimize Google advertisement. And that's the new generation of professions, which actually in America, that's perfectly fine. Besides, and another project that we right now doing is, maybe you heard again, it's called DIA. And we trying to move 100% of our government services online. And we one of the first countries in the world who made electronic driver license and electronic car title. And this is already made. This is already working. And in our pipeline, there's a couple of other projects like you can do like a car insurance online. You can do your pension ID and student ID online. So and then there are more and more and more. And I'm personally happy that we launched first. Actually, it was like first days of January in Kharkiv. We launched a project it's a funny name if I translate it literally because it's called like "Yeah Baby," but
Yeah, baby.
But it's about electronic
Yeah,
infant,
baby.
and we are first country in the world actually that made all these 10 services that mothers that just gave birth to a child have to go around like we calculated 37 documents in 10 separated departments, and you have to run with this to register your child as Ukrainian citizen. Now you can do this in 20 minutes, not going out from the hospital. And we provide them with their tablets, and there's software. So we developed this, and actually, doctor can come to the mother or I would say parents, and then they fill out the forms and done. That's it.
That's incredible. I mean, certainly some really powerful examples there.
Yeah, and the last example, I'm sorry, I'm trying to be brief. It's now we're also doing kind of sort of a similar service like in the States, 911, because before we had just 4 or 5 phones, and this, for God's sakes, this definitely and indeed saves lives, because we calculated that we can decrease the time to arrive like 25%, and that in conclusion could save like 10% more cases. I mean, because that could be like, I don't know, like car crash or something, and this technologies really save lives, especially with government involvement. Thank you.
Talking a little bit more on the strategic side, I see we have a lot of guests here, so I would tell you something that we actually didn't say just yet. So starting last year, it was the first time in Ukrainian history when in our new government and new parliament, we started having the directions that are concentrated on the digital transformation. So these are newly created committee of the digital transformation where I'm working, and the Minister of the Digital Transformation, where Alex is serving right now. So this means that Ukraine took it as one of the strategic goals to transform digitally from within for the business and for its people. And this is very important because this is where we are working, and this is where we are going to. So today I have read one of the panels that are going in the main forum panels regarding the transformation of Bangladesh. And it's a fantastic story. I'm sure you heard of it, about how they are moving forward and transferring and having, like, I think 9% plus GDP every year, which is fantastic, which we want to as well. So the 3 points that we are taking from the other experience, from the other great stories all over the world, that we want for our country in the next 5 years, is to have the coverage of the internet to 100%, is to have most of the people internet literal. So that was literal. Yes, that was Alex was saying. And to make sure that 98 or probably 100% of the governmental services are digitalized. These are very ambitious goals, but this is something that we think will transform not only how we operate inside the governmental structures, but how the country operates. And what Alexander was explaining were fantastic examples of what we were able to achieve in a really, really short term. And this is the direction where we are going, and it will go to, and it will work through the actually the concession way, when we will be encouraging private sector to chip in with the funds of funds that is set up right now, and many very respectable people here participating in it. So the steps are being made, and we are moving forward very quickly, and we have very ambitious goals, but also very high hopes on achieving them.
Well, it sounds like you're doing great work in future-proofing the country through both private and public initiatives, so really well done there. Just wanted to move to the other...
Just one observation.
Sure.
It's important to maybe to the audience which may not seen, because my opinion that we having now a very interesting time when we not trying to catch up the first world by technology gap. We see that we can jump. And this is just like a very important point in technology. We don't continue all technology important steps which were done by, for example, Europe, United States. We jumped already into another world where mobile phone is doing everything. So I think it's an interesting time from this point of view of the whole transformation of the country, when we decided not to try to catch up the train, but to go by the new drones, you know.
Yeah, you're definitely leapfrogging in many ways. I mean, certainly,
Yeah.
e-government services are very much
I can
new
only
and
add
at the
to that
forefront.
in Ukraine they have an army of good engineers, right? So fortunately now these engineers are working mostly for our international customers, for global customers. But if you have good financing in the company for IT projects in the company, if you have good strategy from the government, I'm quite sure that Ukrainian engineers, they will be more than happy to put their attention to Ukrainian projects and help develop the country further.
Yeah. So it seems like you're doing a lot to build resilience. Why don't we go over to the dark side and talk about what you're building resilience against? So what are some of the challenges that you see with the future of tech?
You know, monkey with grenade is more dangerous than monkey without grenade. So, and this is the very important things which we see, and especially the strategy with our plane is the same. What we had understanding that technology can be very dangerous. I think that's we have to understand also, and not to close eyes and to talk about this.
Well, for me, it's where we have to draw a line between where technology help people obtain job and when they make them lose job. Because one of the goals of the government and actually the world to make people happier and I don't know, produce more people, kind of, right? And everyone needs a job. And technology often offers automation. And as a consequence of that, people lose jobs. So I always think about it, like if we jump to this technology and we adopt it massively around the world, how many people will lose their, I don't know,
Their livelihoods.
yeah, exactly. So I always think about it. And I think that's also where the government have to step in, because sometimes it could be really dangerous from this perspective.
So basically, there are two aspects here. So one thing is that sometimes the innovation may be so far ahead of regulation that it can damage a lot of things. Like what happened like in 2008, like with financial crisis, was basically as a result of the financial engineering. And certain instruments and products that were on the market that were not regulated and that caused like a massive crisis on a global level. That's one thing. So I think it's like a right balance between the innovation and the way like kind of we regulate this thing. The other thing, what Alexander mentioned, is automation. I think, and I know many people may not like that, especially libertarians, but I think it is inevitable. It is inevitable that at some point of time we will be forced to have something like universal basic income or equivalent of that, because like the changes and the shifts will be dramatic, and like the role of the government will be to ensure that the society is not falling apart as a result of that.
I totally agree.
Andrew Yang supporter.
How are you guys thinking about the future generations and how you're engaging them both through work training, employing them, reskilling them? You mentioned the university course in digital marketing. What are some other examples? I mean, those of you in the startup ecosystem and the private sector, how are you encouraging, and building capacity in the country?
Can I add one more observation to the future? As maybe you know, I'm one of the founders of Ukrainian Institute for the Future, and we were always thinking about the technologies, gaps, and so on. But I'll give you a little bit already historical example that all futurologists predicted some communicators like phones, etc. So all science fictions. So there was maybe the different names, but no one predicted the usage of this technology, social media. No one. It was unsymmetrical communication. So nobody were predicted Facebook or Instagram or something like this. This is meaning that when we're predicting the future, we are thinking very linear. So we don't think about connection between the ideas. So maybe the future currency will be the likes in Facebook or something. We don't know, just because we cannot predict how the society, our psychology will interact with the technologies which we are creating. This is the biggest problem from my point of view for the now, because we see only the linear part. We don't see the communication and special psychological part. We see now the new generation, which is absolutely another than we are, yes? And we trying, being the old people, from their point of view, yeah, just like, to predict how they will live. Because my opinion that maybe it's a good idea to ask them how they are planning to live. And this is just like now, for example, Ukrainian government connecting to the old, so they're absolutely new one from the viewpoint of generation, etc., etc. So it's absolutely another approach.
Great.
I would agree with Alex here. So in my understanding, the technology itself, it brings some threats, but I think at the end of the day, we will learn how to cope with those threats. So if some of the technology will be disrupting the labor market, there will be regulations how to soften this effect, and sooner or later we'll know how to deal with that. For me, the problem is in another aspect. So what I see is that the speed of the change is increasing, right? So it's very fast now. How societies change, how people change. It's fast and the speed is increasing. And I think the problem will be in the inability of people to accept and adopt the change, because you will have literally months or years or maybe 10 years to get the new technology inside of your heart, inside of your body. And the question is if human is able to do this.
Well, it sounds like we're talking about unintended consequences, so I wanted to continue on that thread for a bit.
So it's really hard to predict the consequences, especially if when you are disrupting something. Most of the innovation these days happens, I would say, by serendipity rather than by well-thought plan. And the reason for this is because, you know, the universe of ideas just expanded exponentially over time, right? So it's really hard to kind of like mentally figure something out. What you have to do, you usually try something like a scientific method, right? You try something, you see it doesn't work, you pivot until you find something that works. So in this regard, there still are risks that some like unintended consequences could kind of like affect the way we live. But I don't really think that there is a huge probability of that happening. It's a low probability, but high impact kind of combination of those two parameters, right? So I don't think it's like something that, other than we have some Android collider and it creates some black hole will swamp all the universe. I don't think that all the other things are either unsurmountable or irreversible.
Well, I also would agree with Alex that you can actually avoid unintended consequences of their implementation of technologies. But the only thing I see that can, and all of them, I totally agree, happens not by the plan. Sometimes it's just blowout, and then people this TikTok thing. You have familiar. This just blown out, and I'm not sure those guys from China. I suppose they invented it, and they had this in mind that specifically this set of people, young people, would use it, and there will be less than 18 years old, and it's, yeah. So this is exciting, but coming back, so the only thing I see that could potentially help is a concept of a sandbox. So. And again, I can see the role of the government here, because they can literally say, look, this could do potential harm. Let's do this in this particular city or for this particular industry, and then we'll see, or on the specific part of the territory, and we see the potential harm. And this looks exciting, sounds exciting, and could give a lot of beneficial things. But still, let's put this on the sandbox and then see.
I wanted to return to the question that you asked regarding what are our plans for the future generations. And from the governmental perspective, you will see moving forward that there will be a tremendous investment into the education. But that is definitely not enough right now, because what we want to do and what we are building is the system that, as Vitaly said, will be as adaptive as possible moving forward. There is no time for us to wait for another year or two for the university to develop a course, then approve it with some ministries, and then start having young people taking it, because they will probably already learn it on the internet and move forward and start making money. So what we want right now is to transform the system that we have to make sure that it is super adaptive and that it allows our younger generation to obtain what they need and to create jobs and create work for the people who really, really want it. Right now, you have seen in this presentation the part that is related to the IT professionals. IT is still a big thing in Ukraine. It's a big boom and continues being, because people are receiving really great salaries. They are working for the top companies of the world. Everyone wants their kid to be from IT, but they sometimes don't understand how to make it happen. That's what we are investing into, to make sure that the IT industry continues growing, produces enough talent, not even talent because we have talent, enough capable specialists who will be able to actually move it onto the probably first expert industry. Right now, IT is the second expert industry in Ukraine, and it's like probably everybody's here goal to push it forward. It's showing tremendous growth. And we see it as one of the really strategic directions for the government and for the companies and for the parliament as well.
I wanted to say about one trend which is already obvious, and there was a fantastic book, China is Superpower, about the influence of the lose in the Go game, where the China understood that it's necessary to develop the artificial intelligence technology. My opinion that comparing, Ukraine is a very small country, comparing to China, to India, and technology. So, but I think that very important task to the government and to the business together is to find the way how to build Ukrainian technology and science inside of the whole tree of AI technology development. I think it's a very important trend, and especially in education, especially in everything, in math, because it's just like it's impossible without good science education. So, and my opinion that for the future generation, we have to think also from this point of view.
Absolutely. I just want to turn it over to the audience and make sure that the session is interactive, but we'll keep going for a bit. Yes, of course.
Okay, question to Alex and Kira, and then follow up to Vitaly, Alexei, and Alex. Okay, so we have these amazing tech entrepreneurs who've now become the change makers, the catalysts within. So for both of you and the others who are also within the government, what goals do you have in the time that you're there in terms of helping to transform the ecosystem? And Alex, it'd be great to say something about Ukrainian Startup Fund too, because I think that's revolutionary. And for everyone else, you know, when you look at Kira and Alex in 5 years, you know, what do you hope that they will accomplish for the IT industry? Because I think that's where you went in there to really change from within.
Well, thank you for the question. And first of all, yeah, we do work in a synergy. We're trying to be like part of. So the committee is in charge of legislation, and we like arms here, literally arms. And our goals is well, first of all, is to double share in Ukrainian of IT expert in Ukrainian GDP. That's pretty much ambitious goal in 5 years, but we will do everything within our hands to make it happen. Second is to almost double number of IT specialists in Ukraine. But it's not just about developers. It's also about all the related professions, about project managers, about sales managers, about delivery managers, and many, many more who could be also, well, they part of IT. So right now we have a little bit more than 200,000 people involved, but we aim to 500,000 people that will be working on in this industry. And in terms of startup ecosystem and money, of course, well, I would say immediate goal is to raise a fund of more than $100 million, specifically focused on investments into Ukrainian startups. So it would be all if I make it brief. So I will
Yeah, so, and from the committee perspective, that's what we are doing. We are looking at these ambitious goals and we are saying, okay, guys, where the roadblocks are right now? And then we are working on the legislation that will remove these roadblocks. And in terms of the startup, that's mainly no roadblocks, but we need to have some incentives that will allow us to build the startup infrastructure and to make sure that people would stay in the country, that there will be proper IP protection, that there will be full support for the funds of funds, there will be governmental and again in the conjunction with the public sector and in conjunction with the business, there will be enough of the informative politics about why a startup is so interesting and innovative, etc. So there will be things that we were all waiting for and that will happen soon, like making sure that foreigners are easily employed in Ukraine, so nobody has this head pain anymore. There will be better legislation that we are including in the labor law to make sure that if you really want to work according to the labor law, you are able to do so, and it's easy and really, really convenient. So everything that Alex said and everything that I said before, like is saying, making sure that we have 100% of the internet coverage, that we have people IT educated, and that there is like enough IT specialists, which is a hint never enough. So this is where we are pushing through.
Nice. More other questions? Yes, in the back.
I had a question. We talked a lot about the government and entrepreneurs themselves, but just in regards to civil society itself, I had a question what the general attitude you think is of Ukrainian civil society towards IT. And I want to go back to the example, we had a presidential candidate in 2019, who introduced for the first time blockchain to the Ukrainian public in an electoral platform, and was really, really mocked for it. It sounded like something ridiculous, and people thought it was more funny than anything serious. So I'm just wondering, how ready is Ukrainian civil society itself to look at IT and to take it seriously, the kind of innovations that's around the world?
So I think that Ukrainian society was doing pretty well over the last 20 years. Like, there was no support in this industry. I think the industry thrived, right? Like, when we saw a really huge gap between the academia and the skills that being taught there and the real market needs, like, we have created corporate universities. Now, each big company, like, I'm sure that we have all these corporate universities, we're fixing this gap. So there is usually a workaround. And I believe that the society will take care for itself. I think government can be a catalyst to like accelerate some things that could have happened much faster than without it, right? So because like it will happen anyway, right? But government role could like enable and accelerate those things. And I personally believe that over the next decade, we will probably see the smooth transition from quantity to quality. So we have like more than 200,000 people in this industry, and these guys, like, they already have their like apartments, they have like cars, they have everything, and some of them will have bigger ambitions. So once we build the right ecosystem to fund the startups, to fund these ideas, to help them test and like scale these ideas like on a global scale, not only for the Ukrainian market but like globally, that can be a huge boost for the quality component that I mean.
I just want to add a little bit from another point and to answer a previous question, because I think it's very important because guys from the government, they're thinking about the industry, and we are industry thinking that it's a lot of work have to be done in the government. So the digitalization of the government, that we will forget about this workflow system, etc., because the amount of people which is doing in the government nothing, which can be replaced by the script, it's a huge in Ukraine. So I think this is the also important. Digitalization of Ukrainian government is one of the most important things which have to be done from this point of view. And another question about the blockchain will be maybe absolutely unpopular, but I say that the blockchain is just another technology. It's not a magic pill. And I'm afraid that we always having this problem of exciting technology which saves the world. My opinion that this is the same technology which we already saw in my 35 years IT career a lot of, and it will remain the same technology as other. So don't be overexcited of it. Use it in appropriate way. It's just a pill where you have to use it when the doctor's saying it's important.
Yes, over here.
I have a question. So I'm representing Davos, so I would have a great experience in a high-tech park building, and we know that we are working together. So my question is, I also working for IT company in TEDx, and my question is about de-digitalization, because what is happening now is a de-digitalization on the level of the network. What I mean, the good ecosystem is working only in condition when there are government, when there are business, when there are IT tech partners, and of course startups and university. And what do you plan on the level of developing of this kind of digitalization on the level of meeting, networking with, let's say, opinion leaders, like, for example, accelerators, and you have a great project as Unit City, and I see the representative here. What do you plan on the level of partnership with business, with IT companies, not only with developing of several IT products, but cooperation in general?
I will tell you an interesting fact. Just returned from Estonia and found that in one of the local startup communities, so from 100%, 35% of startups are from Ukraine. It's a little bit sad that for Ukrainian startups, it's easier to come to Estonia to receive money than receive them in Ukraine. So it's a good question that we need to build a special ecosystem for startups, for angel investments, and so on. And in my opinion, that this is going on now because it's greatly depend on the clever money, or it's greatly depends on the clever investors who wanted to invest into the high tech, not only into the agriculture or the old technology. So, and this is happening in Ukraine. So this process has started, and but maybe not so quickly as we want. But it's very necessary things where the government have to help the business and to create something like DARPA for the military projects, to create something this common investment programs where the government co-invest with the businesses and so on and so off.
Great. So I just, everyone's going to be here after the fact, so we can continue the conversation offline. But I just wanted to hear closing thoughts from all of you. Going back to the conversation we had earlier on will technology save the world? Are you a yes or a no? Why don't we start over there?
Yeah, being an engineer, my first intention is to answer yes to this, because I'm an engineer, right? So I believe in technology. I believe that we cannot stop the technology. But at the end of the day, we are all humans. So I think it rather will depend on human, because it's human who use the technology. But people with use of technology will save the world.
I fully agree. We're competitors with Vitaly, good competitors. But I fully agree that in this, that it's now more dependable on people than on technology.
Yes, in this matter, the technology is just a very good tool, and hopefully it will not be as a monkey with a grenade, but rather a monkey with a tool that will save the world.
Well, my answer would be definitely yes. I can imagine how people can survive in the modern cities without the technology. I can imagine. And for the centuries, we were putting us together in a big conglomerates in the cities. And if you turn off the technology right now, we will be dead. We literally will be dead. If this city will be cut off of technologies, I mean, electricity, I don't know, cell phone maintenance.
Wi-Fi.
Can you imagine what would it be like in what's going to happen in 3 hours after, 12 hours after, 24 hours after? It's impossible. I mean, it's impossible to maintain 6 billion people at this planet without technology. Well, even airplanes, transportation. How the airplane today, it's again about automotive and stuff. The car today it's more computer or it's just a mechanical vehicle. And the same about the airplane. If you cut off an airplane, and it's technology, how people communicate, cut the internet, and our children will be left without education. And so I don't know. I don't know how could there be any opposite answer.
Alex, do you have any final thoughts?
So I think as humans, we tend to overestimate the impact of technology in the short term and maybe underestimate the impact in the long term. And this is because we kind of wired to think linearly, and this is a compound interest, kind of the law of compound interest, right? Like it compounds and it's exponential thing. So, and the net effect, I believe, like for sure there will be pros, there will be cons. Something can be like, you know, like the new tech may create the new consumption, right? And it's bad for the environmental impact, but it can save something. And at the same time, like we need to compare the net effect. So I think the net effect will be positive. I think right now we live in the best time in human history. We have the the longevity. Look at the longevity. What happens? Like 80 something. Like humans never lived that long, right? So the welfare that we have. Yes, we have a problems with income inequality, especially like this is like the hot thing in the Western world these days. But like billions of people were like taken out of the poverty, right? So this is a huge progress that we've made. So I believe, I'm very bullish in that. I believe everything will be fine, everything will be great, and we will thrive.
Wonderful. Well, what a great way to end on a positive note. Join me in thanking the panelists.
Thank you.
Thanks to our moderator. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, again.